Right. There's one question here. Paul, all public companies have accountability to their shareholders, and every action taken at the corporate level is done with the return of investment in mind. What do you believe are the key milestones in sustainability which will enable these companies to clearly demonstrate return on investment?
I think many companies already are demonstrating a return on investment through particularly their environmental programs, where they're able to show either less use of resources or less waste created that would reduce disposal costs, or an ability to generate increased sales just based on coming up with really exciting new green products or efficiency products. So I think in some ways there's already movement in that area. I think the single thing that's keeping us from having a better assessment of that are quantitative metrics that will show how some of these environmental issues can correlate directly to issues like return on investment. How do you make that connection? We've seen some reports from companies like Baxter, which is a medical company, trying to make those connections between the environmental performance and very hard financial metrics in terms of increased revenues and savings. But at this point, we're really not seeing a lot of progress in the reports from companies that make that connection. I think that's why it's important for shareholders to continue to ask for this information, and also for consumers to push for it as well.
Great. One other question. How has the recession impacted the returns, returns for the SRI funds? And I guess the second part of that is there a distinction there between the firms that do SRI investing versus some of the new terminologies, sustainable investing, or is there not a distinction between the two?
Well, the jury's still out a bit on the financial crisis. I think at least some early studies that I've seen and some anecdotal evidence I've seen is that the criteria used by the SRI shops have actually allowed many of us to avoid some of the big blow-ups, particularly in the financial space, where consumer protection screens on companies avoided names like AIG and Citigroup and Merrill Lynch and others that had some pretty major blow-ups. So that's encouraging to us. We certainly like to think that this is an early warning sign for companies that might be at risk. I think as far as the differentiation between a traditional SRI product and a green investing product, many of them are using environmental information to make stock selection decisions. They've all done reasonably well. I would point out that for a strategy that looks simply at something like alternative energy, you see very high volatility because it really is a sector play. And anytime you have a sector play in a high growth area, those can be very much impacted by market movements like we've seen over the last 18 months.
Great. With that, thank you, Paul, and thank you, Dan. With that, I'd like to turn to Alan White. And Alan White, just as a reminder, co-founded the Global Reporting Initiative and served as its director from 1999 to 2002. In 2004, he co-founded Corporation 2020, an initiative focused on designing future corporation to sustain social purposes. He's been a real pioneer, helped hundreds of organizations like People's Earth, and he wrote the paper that's available to everyone at the end of this, titled Consumption, Commerce, and Citizenship, Values Transformation to Build a Sustainable World. So, Alan, if you could spend a few minutes reflecting on what you heard today as it's relevant to the white paper you produced.
Thank you, Mark, and thanks to Daniel, and thanks to Paul as well for very inspiring and rich presentations. I think my few reflections, and I'll keep it to a few, are that moving markets, which is the title of this seminar, has two faces to it, two sides to it. You have to move supply and you have to move demand. So you have to move supply in terms of business understanding of what a sustainable product is, in terms of business sensitivity and understanding of its supply chain so that they too become part of the sustainable product solution, if you will. And investors who are there, as we heard from Paul, need to be far more proactive in driving their portfolio companies toward investing in sustainable products and sustainable processes. On the demand side, moving markets means, as Dan Goleman pointed out so eloquently, It's about awakening consumers and empowering consumers to at levels that we have not seen before, to touch their visceral, their emotional connections to products that are waiting to happen, but because of labeling and certification programs, which are proliferating almost at the rate of one a week, so it seems, the proliferation has in fact had the effect of creating distrust, confusion, and what one observer has called the conflicted consumer, wanting to do the right thing, but unable to do so because of the lack of trustworthy information, accessible information, and the belief, sometimes true, sometimes false, that sustainable products are more expensive products. I would add one point, and that is, on the demand side, is an immense market in government procurement. This is a hundreds of billions, if not trillions, market globally in which government secures its products and services as one of the world's most prolific consumers. And there's plenty of data around to show those who tracks government programs in sustainable products requirements for procurement are seeing a vast uptick, a tremendous uptick in the number of such programs built into procurement guidelines on the part of cities, towns, countries. The EC is moving in the same direction and will undoubtedly, and I think thanks in part to People for Earth, probably will see it at some point in the future in emerging economies like China, Brazil, and India. So at the end of the day, we're trying to build a virtuous circle here, where supply of sustainable products and the flow of such products into the market then awakens demand for such products, increases consumption of such products, and the growing demand for such products then inspires companies to make the investments they need to make to, in fact, expand their pipeline, enrich the scope and the quality of sustainable products. Now, to do so, as you could infer from the discussion in the last few minutes, companies need certain ground rules. They need an understanding what is a sustainable product, and of course that's exactly where standards come in, so that companies come out of the dark. They understand what the ground rules are, and they can, with confidence, invest in this or that technology, this or that process, this or that service, and be assured that if they do so, they're going to reap the market rewards that await them by proper, trusted, accessible labeling and certification programs. We live, as I think both Daniel and Paul have suggested, we're living in a world today, a Web 2.0 world, where where the world is awash with information. There is no concealment anymore. Companies, as one author so provocatively stated, companies are naked today in the marketplace. Whether you're going to be transparent or not is less the company's decision any longer. It's simply a fact of life. What do we do to make that a positive, not a negative, in today's global commerce? Well, we do it through mechanisms like Earthster, which is taking this information-rich world we live in, building systems, building accessibility to information in an orderly way such that companies can receive the guidance they need to know where product impacts are most severe, where negative impacts are most severe, where positive impacts are most prominent, and to correct where it needs correction and to emphasize where it needs expansion, those positive attributes of products. So that's the information world we live in.